An American service member killed in action since Saturday. The Pentagon is withholding the slain service member's identity until next of kin notifications are complete. It's not immediately clear what caused the U.S. casualty. An Afghan soldier was also killed, and several were wounded, according to one official. 4 U.S. service members have been killed in action in Afghanistan this year, following 11 in 2017. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Find more news and information online. Our web address is onenewsnow.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and the One News Now mobile app. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Hang on a second. Perception. You're saying it was the perception. There are 13 Democrats on the special counsel probe, including one who went to what he hoped was a victory party. That's a perception problem, too. They weren't kicked off. You were. Why were you kicked off?
Mr. Gowdy, I cannot speak to Special Counsel Mueller's.
How long did you talk to him?
The reasons why he did or did.
How long did you talk to him when he let you go?
Witness answer the question.
This will be afforded the opportunity. My recollection, it was a short meeting, somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, probably around 15 minutes.
And your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
My testimony, what you asked and what I responded to, was that he kicked me off because of my bias. I'm stating to you it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a what you appreciate, Agent Strozk. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
Wow. That was a heavily charged interchange between Representative Trey Gowdy and FBI agent extraordinaire, Mr. Super Guy, Peter Strozk. He decided to appear before the committee and present himself this morning, and he had a prepared statement. You could tell he was waiting on an opportunity to kind of let it fly. And he did, and he was able to get a substantial amount of, kind of fluffing and hugging from the Democrats. But overall, I don't think he acquitted himself well because his assertions don't hold water. Welcome to the show, everybody. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thanks for being with us today. Great show planned for you today. Really got a lot going on. As you heard, Peter Strozk appeared before the committee. He says he appeared of his own volition. They say that he was served in a subpoena and it was delivered to him and received by him, and therefore he was there under subpoena. There were a lot of really interesting moments in the hearing, and we're going to get into that. We also have Scott Whitlock, Associate Editor for Newsbusters, coming on in hour 1. And in hour 2, we have Jason Piccolo, U.S. Border Agent. He's worked for ICE. He is an expert in this area, and we're going to talk about a case that, admittedly, I'm going to give you a warning before it comes on so that you know this is some really difficult content for the radio. If you have children around or anything like that, you might want to usher them out or govern yourself accordingly. And that'll be in hour 2 where we discuss this case. And it is not that it's a one-off. It's an example of what is happening around the country, and it's only being covered by local news because the left doesn't want anything to stand in the way of their open borders agenda. So we're going to get into that. That's hour 2. Right now, I can't help but feel as if in some of these moments, Peter Strozk definitely gave as good as he got, but he also tried to couch everything that he was doing, all of his activities. And admittedly, he has an amazing career record behind him up to this point. And so, you have to give him some credit for that. But then by the same token, you kind of look at the way he talked, the way that he texted, the things that he said, the kind of arrogance that he displayed. And it makes you wary of everything else that he's saying. So we want to give him credit for his service. We want to acknowledge the fact that he was, up until this point, according to all counts, an exemplary agent. But then Donald Trump came on the scene. And it's as if all of that great prior service and that activity kind of went by the wayside for him. And he was single-minded in trying to stop President Trump from becoming a reality. And maybe it's because we know this is true. The Bible tells us that when we engage in sin, especially sexual sin, which is sin that goes against the temple of the Holy Spirit, it dampens our wisdom. So people who are involved in extramarital affairs actually lose some of their natural wisdom, some of the wisdom that they've earned, because that sin blocks good decision making. And so you've got Peter Strozk, engaged in this workplace relationship with Lisa Page, and their communications really reflected that. Like, he was her savior. He was riding in to protect her from a President Donald Trump and also the nation by extension. He denies all of that now. But it's clear when you read the text messages that that's what it was. Now, he makes a good point during the testimony that, these are private messages that were never intended for public consumption. And none of us want our private text messages to be, put forward for public consumption. But it doesn't change the fact that he was working on something that was for public consumption. And his work as an FBI agent is tinged by the knowledge that he was so single-minded in his support for Hillary Clinton and, at the same time, his obsession with stopping Donald Trump from becoming president. So he goes into a bit of an explanation in this next clip. He talks about how his anti-Trump text messages express his deep patriotism, which I'm unable to believe, but you judge for yourself. It's number 4.
I testify today with significant regret, recognizing that my texts have created confusion and caused pain for people I love. Certain private messages of mine have provided ammunition for misguided attacks against the FBI, an institution that I love deeply and have served proudly for over 20 years. I'm eager to answer your questions, but let me first address those much discussed texts. Like many people, I had and expressed personal political opinions during an extraordinary presidential election. Many contained expressions of concern for the security of our country, opinions that were not always expressed in terms I'm proud of. But having worked in national security for 2 decades and proudly served in the U.S. Army, those opinions were expressed out of deep patriotism and an unyielding belief in our great American democracy. At times, my criticism was blunt, but despite how it's been characterized, it was not limited to one person or to one party. I criticized various countries and politicians, including Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders, then candidate Trump, and others. But let me be clear, unequivocally and under oath, not once in my 26 years of defending our nation did my personal opinions impact any official action I took.
So does that pass the smell test for you? I think we all have different opinions about different things, and any person who has, a decent amount of self-control can separate their personal beliefs from the work that they have to do. And it depends on really greatly how integral your work is to your lifestyle, whether or not you went into it knowing that that's what you'd have to do. So clearly he knew at any point during his career at the FBI that there could be a president that he wouldn't have supported, that a president that he wasn't really excited about could be in command of the country and the government, and he would indirectly answer to that person. So that's a given. We can accept that. But when you read the text messages, we will stop him. I will stop him. The things he said about Trump voters, he could smell them when he went into Southern Virginia. And that's really, he did explain that during the hearing, that there's a bit of a competition between Southern Virginia and Northern Virginia, and there are 2 very different people groups. The rural areas of Virginia are very red politically, very Christian, much more almost Midwestern in their orientation. and the area that surrounds the Washington, D.C. area is one of the wealthiest areas in the country. It is highly concentrated with very well-educated career service individuals who work for the federal government. And so you don't just have FBI agents. You have people who work for every branch of the government who live there because they need close proximity to Washington, D.C. and the surrounding areas where the majority of our government is located. And so they travel to and from their work areas there. The price of houses there it's astronomical. They have good school districts. They also have a lot of private schools. And their political orientation tends to be very blue. They're very hard left. And that is, what are we to do about that? Nothing. But the competition that he described in his explanation doesn't account for that level of animus. It's one thing to say, you know, I traveled out there and I could see the Trump support, or the Trump support was evident, but I went to the Walmart and I could smell the Trump supporters. He tries to explain it, but he just doesn't come off as being honest. It doesn't ring true that the way to describe people that you are simply in competition with is that you can smell them. It's one thing to say, you know, it was the Trump support was evident. It was obvious. I was traveling into Trump country, or I was in the heart of Trump country. I boarded the Trump train. There's so many different ways to describe it. And obviously I can't put words in the man's mouth. I don't really know what his normal vernacular is, but clearly he's a well-educated guy. He's a career service FBI agent. Apparently he's so fantastic that they did like a movie that was based on some of his exploits and busting up crime rings and things. So, you know, how he would term it, really, it's a matter of conjecture. But when you read what he said, you get the feeling that it's not just a normal competition that he was expressing. He has true animus for people who live outside of the Beltway and the inner ring of power. And so much so that he looks down on them. He describes them in a way that you would describe, like if you've ever been to a barn, if you've ever ridden horses, you know that when you enter the area where the horses are stored, or where their pasture, where they spend most of their time, the smell is distinctly different because these are large beasts, and, you know, obviously they're doing what large beasts do outdoors. That smell is evident. He likened human beings who vote in the opposite of him in that same way. That doesn't sound like healthy competition. It sounds like disdain and condescension and a real disaffected type of connection with what he deems to be people who are less than himself. So he goes into that a little bit. Trey Gowdy really launched all efforts. He let the Patriot missiles fly and really went into Peter Strozk. He cut him off a little bit. One of his questions sent the entire committee into disarray, where they just argued and bickered like a bunch of spider monkeys for a while. It was so embarrassing and ridiculous to watch the Democrats try to impede the line of questioning by the chair, Goodlatte. But they were successful in doing so and derailing the course of events for about, I'd say, almost 15 minutes. So here's Trey Gowdy grilling Peter Strozk about his text messages in number 8.
And someone may ask you that question, Agent Strozk, but I didn't. I asked you how many people you interviewed before you wrote it. If you want to get into context, let one of my other colleagues do that with you. Here's what I want to know. Who's the he and he's not?
He is then candidate Trump.
So when you said, no, Donald Trump's not, in connection with the question, going to become president, what's the it?
Chairman Gowdy,
stop it.
Chairman Gowdy, that text needs to be taken in the context of
I'm asking, look, if you want to have a debate over a 2-letter word, we're going to have to do that some other time. What and who did you mean by it?
Mr. Gowdy, as I've stated, that text was written late at night in shorthand.
I don't care when it was written. I don't care whether it was longhand, cursive. I don't care about any of that. I want to know what it meant, Agent Strozk.
It would be his candidacy for the presidency, and my sense that the American population would not vote him into office.
Right. Well, we hadn't gotten to the will yet.
Well, I'm trying to cut to the chase and explain the text.
The will is the American people. Is that right? That's your testimony. The will stop it. You were speaking on behalf of the American people. Is that correct?
Mr. Gowdy, what my testimony is and what I said during extensive asking of this question during my prior interview is I don't recall writing that text.
Are you denying writing the text?
What I can tell you is that text in no way suggested that I or the FBI would take any action to influence the candidacy of
Agent Strozk, that is a fantastic answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, Mr. Gowdy, you asked what I meant.
My question to you is the will.
The witness going to be permitted to answer the question posed?
And at that point, it descended into chaos where you just had so many of them peppering the chair with questions. And, it was really hard to sit through. My blood started to boil because I just thought, not only is this being broadcast across the world and it's clear that the Democrats, Peter Strozk could have said, I smashed voodoo dolls every night at home to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. And the Democrats would have clapped and slammed their hands on the table and said, here, he's a great American, because the Trump derangement syndrome is that strong. The concern that he actually colluded with the Russians is the pretext by which all of this really illegal behavior has gone on. And I don't think the American people were fooled by Peter Strzok's testimony today. I know I wasn't. All right, when we get back, we're going to have more for you. You just keep it right there. And we'll be right back here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
What if I told you that you could clean your family's laundry and help reach the next generation at the same time? That opportunity is here through a company called Redeem Clean. Every time you use Redeem Clean products, you help support the ministry of the American Family Association. In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean laundry detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made in the USA. And they were developed exclusively for the support of the American Family Association. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and order Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with A Legacy Moment. Have you ever thought about the importance of rivers? Many of our towns and cities were built along the banks of rivers. Rivers take us places. There are fish in the river. We use its water to irrigate our fields. We harness the power of the flowing water to give us electricity. Yes, there is life in the river. A relationship with God is much like a river. I love the imagery in Psalm chapter 46, verses 4 through 7. Listen to these wonderful words. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. And then verse 7, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. That's a powerful picture. Verse 4 tells us that we bring joy to God's heart as part of the river. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. We bring joy to God's heart as part of God's river. Secondly, the river's destination is the presence of God. We're caught up with this flow, this life-giving experience that we have. We're going someplace. We're going into his presence. Then God himself is in the water. Verse 7 says, the Lord of hosts is with us. It's not just that he gives us plentiful resources that are found in his river, but God himself is right there in the water. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If you have a relationship with Christ and you are in the river, and God is taking you to his presence, but along the way, he wants to use you to give life to others.
You've been listening to Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia, and heard on the weekly program Living a Legacy. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org. Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
It does appear that Lisa Page apparently has something to hide. She has been in complete defiance of cooperation with the House Judiciary Committee and the Oversight and Government Reform Committee for 7 months now, dating back to the first letter we wrote to the Department of Justice in December of last year asking for her appearance. There have been 2 subsequent letters and 2 subpoenas issued for her appearance, and she has defied all of that. Now, when she says that she has not had ample time to prepare, that is belied by those facts. In addition, our attorneys have had communications with her attorney for nearly a month now about this appearance, and her attorney agreed to accept service of the subpoena and then turned around and immediately tried to reject it. So that's why we sent the marshals to her house to serve the subpoena. They had to go back 3 times before they finally were able to reach her and serve the subpoena on her. So this is a very serious matter. This subpoena is still in effect. I think it's very important for her to understand that, and she should comply with it, and she should comply with it now before she's held in contempt of Congress, which could happen as soon as Friday.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. And so there were many kind of like weird procedural votes. What's interesting about it is that it's you get a real feeling for the body. You think of them sitting there together, all formal, and but really there's a lot of talking going on. There are aides rushing in and out. And what Chairman Goodlatte is describing actually happened today, where they had to take a recess from receiving testimony from Strozk and asking him questions to have some procedural votes, because the Democrats were constantly bringing up points of order and using Robert's Rules of Order to subvert the process. And it's not that they're doing that because they really need a point of order. It's because they don't like the line of questioning, and they wanted to insulate Peter Strozk from as much as they could to assist him in keeping secret things that really should be made known. Now, understandably, and I get this, I believe good, clear-thinking Americans all see this process, and they understand that the investigation into collusion and Russia and obstruction of justice and all of that into the Trump campaign and President Trump, those investigations are ongoing, and therefore things that pertain to them will not be able to be discussed in the hearing. But questions about tertiary aspects of it, things that the committee members already know, for Peter Strozk to refuse to answer those, it goes to his credibility. And he danced around and kind of tiptoed into the water in answering those questions when they were posed by Democrats, but when they were posed by Republicans, he just went back to his form answer. I can't answer that on advice of FBI counsel, which they actually prohibited him. They actually ordered him not to answer any questions pertaining to the investigation. But they didn't have a problem when he was answering them from Democrats, because they supported the assertion that he is just this upstanding, impartial individual whose private feelings turn on around 5:30, 6 o'clock when he gets out of his FBI vehicle and into his private vehicle and drives, towards his home. But during the day, when he's in his FBI vehicle and he's wearing his suit and he's wearing his badge and, he's executing the duties of an agent, his feelings don't ever come into play. It's like they're magically erased or cordoned off into a separate area that's even apart from his physical person. And the feelings only return when he's off duty. And that's when he goes wild with the text messages and he gets to talking about how people smell because of their political beliefs. Does that fly? Do you believe that? I don't. I don't buy it. I don't buy it if you look at it in the context of the way that they ran the Clinton investigation, exonerating her before they'd even interviewed her, that they interviewed her at her home but didn't put her under oath. They didn't bring her in and interview her as they would any other suspect. They interviewed her at her house, and they allowed others to be present who weren't her actual attorneys. And they said it's a crime to lie to an FBI agent, but they could have taken it that step forward, that extra layer of accountability and respectability that would have been added by simply placing her under oath, so that it would be clear to everyone that she would be jeopardizing her own, innocence by not being completely forthcoming. But if you've already decided she's not guilty and she's not going to be prosecuted, and if James Comey has already decided that he's not even going to leave that up to Loretta Lynch because she has tainted her credibility by meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac, which we were told was an accident, but now we come to find out they coordinated that. Because remember, I told you at the time, there's no way those two aircraft, there's 1 billion flights a year. How did two aircraft, two private planes at that, land at the same section of the airport and end up at the same hangar with their noses pointed in the same direction towards each other, where the occupants of the planes can deplane and replane to meet on his jet, which obviously you can't discuss classified information on his jet. And also, even though he's the former president, he lacks clearance to discuss classified things. She's Loretta Lynch. She, at the time, she was the Attorney General of the United States. So if they were only talking about grandkids, of which coincidentally she has none, why do they even need to see each other? Why not just in passing stop and shake hands and say, hey, how are the grandkids? Because that's not what they were talking about. You know that. I know that. Come on. This is where we are, right? So back to Chairman Goodlatte. He talks about the chain of events in Lisa Page's letter. So remember yesterday we talked about how Lisa Page would have to have her attorney. I said yesterday attorneys, but apparently she has one attorney. And that person would review all of the documents. They would need all this time to create interrogatories, which is, sometimes what they're called, which are here's what they might ask you, here's what you could answer. And attorneys are very good at this. This is a part of what they do to prepare clients for trial. And so they're able to analyze, look, this is the subject matter of all of these items. And the possible lines of questionings are this, this, and this. And these are the possible answers that you could give that are truthful and honest and within the scope of what happened. They interview their client. They ask them the questions. They create the answers. They create alternative answers. And then they prep the client some more. The problem is she's had months and months and months to get that done. And they did give her information. Chairman Goodlatte actually disputes what Lisa Page's letter to the committee saying that she couldn't appear. He disputes her assertions in that letter. It's number 7.
I spoke with the general counsel of the FBI earlier this morning, Dana Bente. He says they want her to testify. They reached out to her, in fact, when she says the documents weren't made available. They reached out to her to let her know, hey, you've got a deposition. Don't you want to come in and examine documents? So finally, after that was done, she went down there at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, did examine documents for a few hours. There was a glitch, a computer glitch, with regard to classified documents, plus the fact that her classified status, her security status had to be reinstated so she could examine classified materials. That was done. That was done. And later that evening, the computer glitch was solved. And we know that because we know other witnesses went in and examined classified materials. So we think that is simply an excuse for not appearing. We think it's inexplicable. And we think she needs to comply with this subpoena, and she needs to do it immediately.
So there are a number of things here. First of all, they even gave her the opportunity to show up today, where she would have been seated in the hearing room, within almost throwing distance, arm's distance, toss a pencil to him, her former lover, Peter Strozk. She opted not to do that as well. Now, he showed up. He clearly was prepared. He didn't want to show up to their private hearing. He was subpoenaed for that. He showed up. He agreed to come to this hearing, and then, of course, they issued the subpoena because they weren't sure if what is his answer. And then he said, oh, I already agreed, but he received the subpoena as well, and he showed up today. The question is, where is our society? Where are we as a society when we have basically he's a public servant, and so is she. Now, I know she no longer works for the FBI, but public servant is what she was. And she's a citizen of the United States, meaning she is subject to subpoena by Congress. Where are we when people basically decide, I'm just not doing that. I'm just not showing up for a congressional subpoena. Here's my letter that says why. Now, they're threatening to find her in contempt of Congress. That's true. And it could possibly result in, I'm not even sure what happens when you're in contempt of Congress. If you're in the audience, please call in. Let's discuss it. 866-963-2037. If you know what happens when you defy a congressional subpoena. I guess the reason I don't know is because it never occurred to me that anyone would feel so led to do so, like so empowered that they didn't need to show up. I just find it really disturbing. It's upsetting. It's disturbing. It's not okay that what we have going on now is completely outside of the realm of normalcy. And we literally have two different thought processes on it. In Congress, you have the Democrats who feel by any means necessary, take Trump down. And then you have the Republicans who seem like they're, yes, you've got Trey Gowdy, you've got Jim Jordan. They're attacking this thing, they've got their claws bared, but it's not, I don't feel like they're using everything at their disposal. Now, maybe they are. Maybe they are using everything at their disposal, and this is the most that they can do is have these hearings and threaten to hold people in contempt of Congress. But is it that that's going to get us where we need to be? Are we going to find that these proceedings lead to justice for the American people? Because we're owed, anyone who works in the government, who works for, they're earning tax dollars, money that we all contribute to. We work hard and they take the money out before we get it and send it off to the federal government, and they pay all of these 22 million, 24 million federal employees. And so we're the constituents here, and we are owed some type of explanation and some justice on the behaviors that we've seen on display here. Every time someone just gets away with this stuff with no ramifications, it places us in a position where the law becomes split. There's one law for everyone else, and then there's basically no law for those who are elected over us, hired over us. Instead of the consent of the governed, you have these individuals kind of operating and doing whatever they feel is best, and we're paying them to do it. Yet when it's time for them to answer, they don't feel like they need to do anything. So a few more details on, there's a letter that's come out that was issued by Chairman Goodlatte and Trey Gowdy. They sent the letter to Lisa Page's attorney. In the letter, there are three options for her to undertake. She can appear tomorrow with Peter Strozk, which that was already scheduled. She did not do that. She did not show up for that today. She can present herself for deposition on Friday the 13th, which is tomorrow. She can do both 1 and 2. Those are the only options that the House Judiciary Committee Chairman and House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, Goodlatte and Gowdy, those are the only two options they've offered to her. They required her to come before the committee to answer questions or face contempt proceedings. Now, Lisa Page was legal counsel, just to refresh our memories. What did she do? How was she involved in this? Lisa Page was she was a legal counsel to former FBI Director Andrew McCabe. She's a key witness to the committee's joint investigation into decisions made by the Justice Department, and they've subpoenaed her. They wanted her to appear yesterday. She refused to appear. Now, the letter they sent over includes a little bit of language that was pretty interesting. Interviewing your client, Lisa Page, is an important part of this investigation. After months of trying to secure her appearance, the committee scheduled her for deposition on July 11th, 2018. Despite proper service of your client with a subpoena directing her to appear, she did not. The Judiciary Committee intends to initiate contempt proceedings on Friday, July the 13th, 2018 at 10:30 a.m. So they're pretty serious about moving forward with, efforts to force her into their presence. We are also aware of committee efforts to schedule your client's appearance for over 6 months now. So they offer to stay the contempt proceedings, provided Lisa Page voluntarily appears on July the 12th at 10 a.m. While your client would still be deposed at some point, appearance at the hearing scheduled for Thursday, July 12th at 10 a.m. would negate the need for immediate contempt proceedings. So she's past that deadline as well because she didn't show up today. I find it fascinating that she's doing this. You have to kind of wonder, so if that's the case, if she's facing contempt of Congress proceedings, at what point does she basically she's showing her hand. She's guilty of something. She's an attorney herself. She has an attorney. They are tossing out a bunch of excuses as to why she can't appear. And so here are a few of those. As we go out of this segment, I want you to hear some of the excuses that she has provided, which have been immediately refuted by Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte. So her first excuse is that she was not provided sufficient notice to prepare for the deposition. He counters that by saying on December 19th, 2017, Chairman Goodlatte and Gowdy sent a letter to the Justice Department requesting to interview her. That was 7 months ago. Another letter was sent in April. Committee staff have been in direct contact with her attorney since June of 2018, and she and her attorney have refused to commit to a date for the interview. Her next excuse, the committees will be asking Lisa Page about materials she has not yet reviewed. The reality, many of the documents that she would be asked about are documents that she created. Additionally, these very same materials were provided to Ms. Page during her interview with the Inspector General. Excuse, the scope of the interview was too broad for her and should have been narrowed. Reality, according to Goodlatte and Gowdy, the scope covers Mrs. Page's involvement in the matters pertaining to the committee's investigation into decisions made by the Justice Department and FBI in 2016 and her role related to those decisions. This was clearly communicated to Ms. Page. She really doesn't have a leg to stand on here. And I get it. She doesn't want to be there. But it looks like they're intent on getting her there. To me, it's of the utmost importance that they do so. Otherwise, what is to stop other people from defying congressional subpoenas? Either you gotta show up or you don't. What does subpoena mean otherwise? All right, that's this segment. We'll be back with our first guest of the first hour of the show, Scott Whitlock. Stay right there. Stacey on the Right.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
As a newly married couple, Tony and I had many opportunities to nurture children. Our church, Bethany Baptist, embraced the concept that every child should be cared for by the church. Bethany had programs that reached out to the community, such as Vacation Bible School and fun programs for young people.
Many of our friends at church had kids, so whether we were going to their houses or they were coming over to ours, we were always around children. Sometimes we'd even invite kids to spend a weekend with us so their parents could get away. We knew we would have children of our own eventually.
Little did we know what God had in store for us.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. As if college students aren't already totally triggered, George Washington University hosted a workshop for students and faculty on the unmerited perks and favors showered upon white Christians, which are unavailable to everyone else. The Multicultural Student Services Center wants to teach minority students they are dupes. Meaningless buzzwords like ally, unconscious bias, and microaggression were employed for this purpose. The Bible is very clear that we are indeed privileged to be the beneficiaries of Jesus Christ's great work on the cross. We are also called to suffer with him, which is a privilege. Christianity is open to everyone, period. Wouldn't it be great if GWU got out of the business of oppressor talk and back to teaching higher ed? Because that is what the parents of those students are paying tuition for. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the program. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is a website where you can register for our Marriage and Family Conference. We'd love to see you in Tupelo, August 17th and 18th. Also, you can go to afr.net and check out the great content over there. And right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Scott Whitlock, frequent guest of the program. He's associate editor for Newsbusters. Scott, thanks for joining in today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Okay, so let's talk about this. It's like the whole world has gone mad. Donald Trump issues a couple of sternly worded comments about NATO's contribution levels and the member states not really picking up their end of the bargain. And everybody in America says it's the end of NATO.
Right, yeah, and particularly on ABC, they kind of freaked out opening their morning show, Good Morning America, saying that Trump was blowing up NATO, that he was taking these problems to a new level, and et cetera. And I think the real hypocrisy here is that when Barack Obama was president, they never seemed to question his foreign policy. They never called into question any decisions he would make on issues like the Iran nuclear deal and whether that was wise or whether we were going to get much out of it. But everything with Trump, when he's clearly just negotiating, they turn into the end of the world apocalyptic type stuff.
So I'm giggling because, Scott, do you remember, the images are seared into my mind, partially because I'm a veteran and I remember all of the other presidents, leading up to President Obama, their personas when they were on foreign soil was always very erect, very commanding. It didn't matter how tall they were or what their, what their general appearance was. It was always a commanding presence that was presented on behalf of the United States. And our generals are like that. Our military leaders are like that. And so when President Obama was inaugurated and he began to go around the world and really apologize for America, and he was bowing and stooping and just really it was so disconcerting to see. And I'd turn on the news and there'd be nothing. Like no acknowledgement that it was a complete about face, that presidents before him had never presented themselves in this way, that America has never lost an international world war, and therefore we don't have to bow to anyone. I mean, it was just kind of flabbergasting. And then you come, fast forward to today, we got Donald Trump, an alpha male, admittedly, and that has not worked to his benefit. Historically speaking, for him, his public life has not always been benefited by his alpha male status, but that is what it is. And he goes out and he uses every opportunity to address the concerns of Americans. We're tax-paying Americans who are footing the bill for the protection of all of these countries in Europe, and they seem not to care that they're doing things that we don't like. And our American media seems really complicit in dumbing down the fact that Trump's actually speaking what a lot of Americans believe and say themselves.
Well, I think they definitely don't seem to think the media that he's representing any kind of political base, when clearly this is the stuff he was saying when he got elected, and this got him elected. But I also want to go back to your earlier comparison of Obama. That's absolutely true, because it was very much that the media would cover for Obama on things like this. I don't know if you remember his quote when he was asked about if he believed in American exceptionalism, and he said, "Oh, sure, just like the British believe in British exceptionalism, and the Belgians and so on," which is essentially his way of saying no. And yeah, that type of thing, they did not want to cover that. They didn't want to cover the bowing and any of these other things that a good chunk of Americans in this country might not like, because that's what ABC, NBC, and CBS would often do, is just cover for the previous president.
Yeah, and so Scott, I'm glad you brought that up. So let's talk about that for a second. I've been outside of this country. I grew up in Germany. I've been outside this country to many, many other nations, and other nations do not think of themselves as exceptional. I mean, I've been to Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabian people do not believe they are exceptional. They believe that their royal family that rules over them is exceptional because they are royal. Britons don't believe that they are exceptional. They have a certain kind of we're a royal people. You know, they're a unique people. They're a free people. They've never been enslaved. You know, they definitely have some points of you know, feeling that they're special and unique. But exceptional is not a term that Brits would use to describe Britons. It's just not. Their empire was so large at one point, it encompassed all kinds of different people, and Brits didn't feel the entire empire was exceptional. They felt that the people who were actually what they call legitimate Brits, you know, people who are actually British, that they were pretty special for conquering everybody else. But exceptionalism is a uniquely American concept, and Barack Obama seemed to be the first president we'd ever had who didn't get that. And I think Donald Trump gets it, and he's really operating from a position of strength because we do kind of hold all the cards at NATO, don't we?
Right. And I mean, I think that's a good point. And I think part of the journalists don't get that because they reflect, they would see that Obama comment and just kind of nod their heads about that. And I think that's also sort of, we have this liberal bias from the press, but there's, in addition to the bias, kind of a geographical bias in the sense that a lot of these big media outlets, New York Times, ABC, NBC, they're located in D.C. and New York, and that's about it. So they represent that kind of mentality of a New York, D.C., L.A., rather than representing the whole of the United States. So they would see that comment by Obama and really just not see anything objectionable about it.
So where do we go from here as Americans who truly believe we are exceptional and that we want our children to believe that? How do we kind of counter this leftist narrative? Because I believe it's kind of seeped into the public schools, and a lot of Americans have their kids in public schools, and they're working and they're, you know, doing laundry and cooking dinner and paying mortgages and haven't really considered whether or not their children are being taught that. Or that they're being taught that America is not only not exceptional, but is horrible because of, you know, slavery or, you know, whatever else it is that ever went wrong in our country. Like no other country ever had anything wrong in their history. I mean, it's such a double standard to only hold America responsible for every bit of our history and every other country gets a pass. But how do we approach that as people who truly do believe that this is an exceptional place full of exceptional people? And we know it's true because everybody's fighting like the Dickens to get in here by hook or by crook.
Right. Well, I think there's two answers. On a kind of micro level, my wife and I actually over the 4th of July went to Williamsburg, and we got to hear the Declaration of Independence being read. And that's really kind of an inspiring experience. And I think parents need to take the history of this country and the positive aspects and the greatness of living in America and impart that onto their children themselves, because like you said, unfortunately in schools they're not really getting it, and they're certainly not really getting it in the media. And I would say the second part of that answer is kind of in the larger macro sense. The impact of the media is, fortunately, it's lessening in the sense that less and less people are kind of wedded to getting their information from the New York Times, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And we can see that partly just because of in the last 20 years or so, certainly in the late 90s and 2000s, the explosion of the Internet, alternative media, talk radio, Fox News, whatever all these different outlets, they are Americans just have more and more opportunity to get their media from other sources and sources that aren't going to give them kind of the same old agenda. So I think that is the positive side. The media is as bad as they've ever been, but people have more choices and more opportunity. And I think that's where part of this sort of rage that we see from the media getting even more extreme comes from, because they don't like the fact that we have so many more opportunities to get our media from different places.
I agree. And you guys track it so well at Newsbusters. I mean, you want to know how many minutes they spent talking about this garbage story or that garbage story? Go to Newsbusters and you'll see the breakdown, because you guys have people who their job is just to watch TV and track this stuff. And we're really grateful for that, because otherwise, how would we know? It appears biased. You feel like something's not quite right. But when I read the breakdowns on Newsbusters, sometimes I'm like, wow, that's even worse than I thought. I thought they were talking about 24/7, but they literally were. Like, you know, every 60-minute segment, they had 48 minutes of it was about Donald Trump being, you know, a Russian agent, which is so ludicrous. But people are believing it because they have the brainwashing factor. So let's talk a little bit more about this. It's this whole idea that if you believe America is exceptional, flaws and all, warts and all, then you're going to operate differently than if you don't. When you're out on the foreign policy front, it's not that American exceptionalism precludes other nations from being exceptional. It's a statement, in fact, that stands on its own, that enables us to be able to make decisions and to, I really feel, effectively utilize our resources abroad. And I think that's what Donald Trump is trying to do in getting NATO countries to come up to their stated agreement of 2% of GDP for every country that's participating. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is just, look, journalists don't really like that he's out there criticizing NATO and criticizing these countries that aren't living up to their ideals and their stated goals. And so what we see in the media is a real hypocrisy on this because, look, Barack Obama went over to other countries. This is something that we're working up for a future item in 2016, and he attacked he said that basically lectured Britain that they shouldn't vote for Brexit and so on. And he kind of interfered in their election. And you had Boris Johnson, who was the conservative mayor of London, complain about that. And what we saw is that there were networks like ABC that, silenced crickets because they did not see that as controversial. Yet now we have Donald Trump going over to Britain and saying these things and talking about NATO, and it's suddenly very controversial. So we really want to point that out, that it's a total double standard about what they think is controversial from our presidents when they're going abroad.
Yeah. So, and one that I've had an actual editor of a major newspaper tell me that I was facilitating lies that were unsubstantiated when I asserted that the Obama administration attempted and really spent money to meddle in. And so the Obama administration was behind it, but they used an NGO that was operating and doing, kind of like 501c4 work, but not really, in Israel. And they were doing ads and all kinds of get out the vote efforts for Bibi Netanyahu's opponent. And the animus from Barack Obama towards Bibi Netanyahu is legendary. So there's no need to, I just don't even tolerate that kind of talk. Oh, he liked him. No, he didn't. He hated him. And he actually spent money, not tax dollars, but NGO money in Israel to try to unseat Bibi Netanyahu. Liberals never acknowledged that, but it happened. And they didn't have a problem with it because they hated Bibi too.
Right. Yeah, I know. That's a great example. Israel, England, this president wasn't really shy about trying to go after foreign leaders that he didn't particularly like or were conservative or whatever, and kind of weigh in other countries' elections or other countries' initiatives. Again, with the Brexit thing, they said afterwards that there were a lot of people who were kind of on the fence, 50-50, and then Obama kind of came in and told them what to do, and they resented it. And he may have tipped it over to Brexit actually happening because it was a pretty close vote. So, yeah, you put that together with Israel, and it really is kind of shocking how selective they are with what is okay for our presidents to do and not do as far as overseas countries.
I'm telling you. I mean, just those two examples alone, I just want acknowledgement. I don't need anyone to condemn it or to tell me how they feel about it. Just acknowledge that Barack Obama did that stuff and then talk about what Donald Trump is doing, which coincidentally, President Trump at NATO was not taking actions or making statements to impact other countries' electoral processes. He was only talking about their obligations to NATO, and he has every right to do so when America's spending dwarfs the next, I think, 6 or 7 countries combined, and they still don't spend as much as we do. And we're spending more than the 2%. So, and I know our economy is outsized and they probably feel like, well, you can afford it, but that's not the point. The point isn't what we can afford. The point is what they agreed to do. And Germany could contribute much more. They have the GDP, their GDP is large enough that their contribution, if it were 2%, it would be much larger, but they're just not giving it, which is crazy. I just can't understand why we would allow that any longer, which is why Donald Trump is talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, it is certainly reflecting of you in the country, and I think that's, like I said earlier, that's what they don't understand. they have a kind of New York, D.C. liberal attitude, and that's also why they didn't see there's any possibility of Donald Trump being elected president.
Yeah, I watched that little compilation video the other day and giggled until my eyes streamed tears. I still love those compilation videos of their sorrow from election night. You know what? Thank you so much, Scott Whitlock, Associate Editor for Newsbusters, for joining the program today. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks for having me on.
All right. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this. Keep your kids' ears safe. We're coming in hot.
Urban Family Talk.
I'm Miki Addison of Urban Family Talk, a division of American Family Radio. We're calling on Christians to push back against the enemy's attack on families. To that end, I'd like to invite you to our Marriage, Family, and Life Conference. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
This is American Family News. I'm Steve Jordahl. While leaving Brussels and a meeting with NATO allies, President Trump discussed his upcoming summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin and how he hopes to improve the relationship between the two nations. House Speaker Paul Ryan believes the president should meet with Putin.
Oh, I don't have a problem with face-to-face meetings, but I've made this, the president and I have talked about this a number of times. Vladimir Putin is not our ally and not our friend. I've made that clear. I think most of us feel that way. You just have to look at what they try to do to our democracy and to other democracies around the world. They do not share our interests. They thwart our interests. Engaging with him on that is constructive and good, but I think we should be really clear about who we're dealing with.
President Trump has said he will discuss the current state of the Syrian conflict and, once again, whether Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. The meeting between the two leaders will take place next week in Helsinki, Finland. FBI Special Agent Peter Strozk testifies before the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees on Thursday. Strozk is before the committees to discuss politically charged text messages between he and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page about then-candidate Trump's election. Special Agent Strozk responding to questions about his personal discussions and opinions from Chairman Goodlatte.
I'm telling you, sir, I separated out my personal belief from any
But you did not do that with regard to Attorney Page, who was also involved in these investigations.
Sir, I disagree with that. I separated out my personal beliefs from any action I took officially as an FBI agent every day.
Strozk testified that he regrets sending anti-Trump text messages. Former FBI lawyer Lisa Page has agreed to appear on Capitol Hill Friday for testimony, despite defying a subpoena and choosing not to appear Wednesday as initially requested. South Carolina is making a move to provide genuine health care for women. AFN's Charlie Butts explains.
Governor Henry McMaster used a line-item veto to eliminate nearly $16 million in family planning funds that would go to different groups that also do abortions. Holly Gatling of South Carolina Citizens for Life explains what the move will and will not do.
This is not a move to try to stop family planning in South Carolina. It is a move to try to stop any kind of government funding going to any organization such as Planned Parenthood that does abortions, because abortion is not health care.
Simply put, it's the destruction of the life of a preborn baby.
Abortion is not pregnancy prevention. It's terminating a pregnancy. Family planning involves pregnancy prevention. It also involves fertility care.
Governor McMaster is asking the state health department to ask the Federal Health and Human Services for a waiver so that the funds can be earmarked for local health clinics that can not only work with patients for family planning, but can also provide a wide range of health services which abortion clinics, including Planned Parenthood, do not offer, in spite of federal tax support to the abortion conglomerate of an excess of $500 million a year. I'm Charlie Butts.
Bankrate.com is out with a new study on the best states to retire.
Hail, South Dakota, a great state of the land.
Dreaming of a state where you can retire comfortably? Apparently, South Dakota should be at the top of the list. Bankrate.com studied retirement states and found South Dakota is the best state in the nation to retire, followed by Utah, Idaho, New Hampshire, and of course, Florida. The study looked at 7 categories: cost of living, taxes, healthcare, the weather, crime, cultural vitality, and well-being. And while South Dakota missed the mark on weather, healthcare, and culture, it placed first in well-being and second in taxes. The worst state to retire? New York, where cost of living, taxes, and healthcare quality are a challenge. Other states rounding out the worst on the list to retire: Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, and Maryland. Derek Dennis, Fox News.
And finally, the Trump administration says all eligible small children separated from their families as a result of its zero-tolerance immigration policy have been reunited with their parents, with the exception of 46 children under 5 that were not because of safety concerns or deportation of their parents. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
On Long Island, police arrested Tommy Alvarado Ventura early this morning. He is accused of sexually assaulting a child, stabbing a stranger at a bar, and then stabbing an acquaintance at home.
Police say he has a criminal record and has already been deported 4 times. Long Island reporter Kristen Thorne is live in Hempstead with details. Kristen?
Sade, police say Alvarado Ventura did not know the woman who he allegedly stabbed outside this bar here in Hempstead. They say he put a knife inside her mouth and slit the side of her face. She also suffered a punctured lung. She is in serious condition at the hospital. Also recovering at the hospital is that 2-year-old girl who he allegedly sexually assaulted. She had to have surgery to repair her injuries.
This is, in 28 years, probably the most heinous criminal act I've ever seen.
Police say sometime Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, 31-year-old Tommy Alvarado Ventura sexually assaulted and beat a 2-year-old girl in his apartment in Hempstead. The girl's 4-year-old brother was also in the apartment.
There was a person who was there watching the children. That person reports that he heard some crying from the child at the time when Mr. Ventura was at the house before he got to the bar.
He's talking about El Mariachi Loco Bar in Hempstead. They say Alvarado Ventura came here to buy pot. He got into an argument with a 24-year-old woman, stabbing her several times in her back and face. Police say he then returned to his apartment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I gave you guys warnings about that one, and we have a little bit more audio on that. We also have former Border Patrol agent and ICE supervisory officer, former infantry officer in the U.S. Army, Jason Piccolo, is going to be joining us next segment. We're going to talk about immigration and border security and the announcement that many of the children who were separated from their parents, all of them except just a few, were reunited with their families. And that our government is back to catch and release thanks to the Democrats. They won this particular salvo. And I just wish that we had a Congress that would get together with the president on this to prevent this, because these people are being released into the country. And some of them aren't doing what needs to be done, as in adhering to the law. You would think that if you were in the country illegally, you would want to be as careful as possible not to do stuff like the depraved evil that this man visited upon these small kids and the 2 women. I guess he was in a rage. Who understands or who can know and really process what drove this man to do this stuff? So it's interesting. The report that you're listening to is a local news report. And I'm telling you that because she goes on to close out the segment with a very interesting point, something that you and I would probably, hey, this is logic. Anyone should ask this question. But to hear a news person ask it, I was flabbergasted. It's number 2.
When the mother of those 2 children returned home, she discovered that her 2-year-old daughter had sustained severe injuries about her body. And when she approached and spoke to Mr. Ventura about those injuries, it was at that time that Mr. Ventura attacked that woman also, stabbing her multiple times and striking her repeatedly about her body.
Police say Alvarado Ventura has an extensive criminal history, including possession of drugs, assault, resisting arrest, DWI, and disorderly conduct. He's been deported 4 times to El Salvador. A woman who appeared to support Alvarado Ventura fainted after he went before a judge in Hempstead this morning. We reached out to ICE about the what's going on here with Alvarado Ventura being deported 4 times and being in the country. They did not get back to us. As for the mother of the children, she was finally able to get help. What police say when Alvarado Ventura fell asleep, she went to a neighbor, called police. They came to the apartment and arrested him. He is being held without bail.
So they reached out to ICE to find out why the guy was still in the country. 4 deportations back to El Salvador. That is some determination for him to get back into the country 4 times. But it means also that there's a conduit by which people who want to re-enter the country illegally can travel. And that, as difficult as it sounds to someone like, to me specifically, not having any transportation and traveling thousands of miles through different countries and making it into the United States and then crossing the Rio Grande illegally sounds an impossible task. But clearly it's not impossible because he did it 4 times. And this time, hopefully, he will be incarcerated for the rest of his natural-born life, and he'll never have the opportunity to re-enter our country illegally again. And so when we're talking about illegal immigration, when we get into this subject matter, I just get so sick of people. Well, they're coming here out of love. They're coming here for a better life. Sure, a ton of people are coming here illegally because they want a better life. Everybody on the planet would live here if they could. Imagine how many Russians. They have 146 million people that live in there. Imagine how many of them, if they could just raise their finger one time and not have to make any political statements and had no danger of reprisals or being kidnapped or anything like that, if they didn't have to worry about being sent to jail or losing their jobs or what have you, if they could just raise their finger and then pack their stuff and move to the United States, imagine how many would. Now, take that number, because that's 146 million people. I'd say maybe 80% of them would just come here straight off. They probably wouldn't even pack. Think about all the people who are in third world countries where there aren't real paved roads, there aren't normal bathroom practices. How many of them, if they were given the opportunity, if you just raise your hand, you will be put on the next plane to America. And when you get off the plane, you'll have a passport and an ID and a driver's license and everything you need to claim citizenship. You'll be an American citizen. How many other billions of people would come to America? Now, you're telling me that because people who come from South America have such a close proximity to this country, they have rights that other people around the planet don't have? We're doing more legal immigration than any other nation on the face of the planet. And the faster we bring people in without assimilating them, the less likely it is that our grandkids will have the same American experience that we have. And I'm saying that as a person of color. So this isn't about white Americans seeing their numbers dwindling and not wanting the America to become brown. Who cares what color the people are? It's about the American experience. If you come here and you buy into our Constitution and you buy into the whole concept of that flag and everything that goes along with it, the Constitution, capitalism, the Federalist Papers, all of it, using the bathroom indoors, paved roads, women being able to walk around freely with their heads uncovered, getting educations, owning companies, owning land and property, and voting. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's a very complex thing when you have all of these people living here and everyone's buying into the same idea. You have a nation that is strong and really has a respect for individual liberty. If you don't have people buying into the American experiment and becoming Americans when they get here, not Salvadoran Americans or African Americans, not people who are mad because something small, some small slight becomes a indictment of the entire country, then you have a problem. Then you have little Somalia popping up in, the Northwest, and, little Islam or little Iran popping up in Dearborn, Michigan. You have these areas where regular Americans, you can't go there, you can't travel there, because the people have set up basically a reenactment of the country that they fled from, the country that was too horrible for them to stay in, the country that they felt a credible fear of danger, prosecution, some kind of violence. They come here and recreate that same thing because they're not being taught how to be Americans. It's clear that the culture is superior because people want to come here. You don't have a border control problem on the border of Russia. You don't have border control problems in African nations. You don't have people from Italy and France fighting by hook or by crook to immigrate into Iran or Iraq or anywhere in the Middle East. I mean, do you think that's because those other cultures are superior to theirs and the people who live nearby just don't like anything that's superior to their own? Or is it because there's something about the Western experience, most specifically the American experience, but Western experiences, obviously, because they're having massive migration issues, there's something about it that people want for themselves. They want the modern amenities. They want cell phones. They want comfort. They want air conditioning. They want to be in these countries. But assimilation takes a generation. It's not something that you just come here, you walk around a little bit, observe, and all of a sudden you're assimilated. If it was that easy, we could have just unfettered immigration because people would just show up and instantly assimilate, and there you go. But habits are hard to break. If you're working on anything in your life right now, that resonates with you. I know it is resonating with me. It is so hard to break out of an entrenched habit. And your habits are things that are formed over the entirety of your lifetime. And the habits are actually wired into your brain. They're pathways in your brain. And the reason your brain hardwires habits into pathways is so that you can basically, higher level functions need more brain power in order to operate. So that's why that 10,000 hour principle is so, it's the most fascinating thing I've ever read. Malcolm Gladwell, he talked about how experts spend 10,000 hours doing something and then they achieve a level of expert. Well, the reason it takes 10,000 hours is because that's about how long it takes for pathways for an activity to be created and cemented in your mind to the degree that whatever you're doing becomes second nature and you can actually pass that difficult activity into your secondary processes, meaning your brain's just doing that on its own without you literally thinking about it, commanding it to do so. And then you can devote your mind to other more difficult tasks, learning something new, memorizing something new, or creating anything else that you want to do. So much so, I was reading a book. I'll have to get the title off of here for you. And I've mentioned this on the show before. The book is about people who've had traumatic brain injuries and how the habits that they formed survived the traumatic brain injuries. So some of the habits did not survive. Like these are people who were well into adulthood who could no longer dress themselves. They couldn't remember people's names, but they could remember how to do their jobs. If you took them to the place where they worked, they could do their job. But if someone walked up to them and said, "Hey, what do you want for lunch today?" "I'm sorry, who are you? And am I eating lunch here today?" So the person's hardwired activities that they'd gotten to that expert level on survived the traumatic brain injury. So what I'm saying to you is that we have to bring immigrants into this country and give them the opportunity to achieve expert level American status in successive waves so that we don't overburden a populace that's already, I mean, do you think Americans only, that's all we have time to do is just teach other people who come from foreign countries how to be Americans? No. That's why we can't have the immigration be at such a level that you don't have time to learn these things by osmosis, by learning how to speak English, getting a job, working on that job for a while, and then progressing up to the next level. Meanwhile, your kids are in American school being taught that socialism's bad. That's why you came here, because socialism is horrible. Socialism is just communism light. That's why you're here. The reason you don't want to keep living in that socialist pit you came from is because of socialism, and because there's no rule of law, and because there's also no money, and your GDP is in the toilet. These are the realities that kids have to learn so that they don't want to recreate those situations from the old place here in America. And all of this has to go on while we do everything else that we do. The entire population cannot be devoted to assimilating people who are here from another country. So what we used to do was we used to spend some of our foreign aid budgets were devoted towards tamping down violence, eliminating the drug trade in South America. We had a whole system of that set up that was running at optimum speed when Barack Obama took the presidency over from George Bush. And what did Barack Obama do? Dismantle it, remove the funds. Violence escalated in South America, and then he instituted catch and release. He was deporting people like crazy. Then he said, well, we'll just catch them and release them into America because that works better for the Democrats. He started this problem. It's another one of his failures, one of his legacies, Barack Obama. And now Donald Trump has to try to clean it up. So we'll talk about how he's doing that and why he's doing it the way he's doing it when we get back with our next guest, who's a former U.S. Border Patrol agent. Mr. Piccolo will be with us right after this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, I'm reading through the Old Testament now, and I'm coming to places that are named that I see on our Israel tour every March. It's really fascinating to think that Jericho existed way back in the Old Testament thousands of years ago, and I can visit there today. The same can be said for Jerusalem. The Bible literally comes to life when you visit Israel, the Holy Land. Now, we're going in March. My wife Allison and I, we lead these tours every March. So if you would like to go with us, you need to go to the website and check it out. It's twholyland.com, twholyland.com. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, just call us at 800-FAMILIES, option 5. That's 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and we'll send you a brochure.
Hello, I'm Pastor Joseph Parker, and this is Daily Time in the Word. It's our goal to help you better understand the great blessing of spending time in God's Word every single day. You know, in the Word of God, the Ten Commandments is a wonderful discipleship tool for you in your individual life as a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ. And parents, it's a great discipleship tool for you to use with your children. The Ten Commandments are found in their entirety in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and Deuteronomy, chapter 5. And in both places, they're wonderful tools that bless the children of Israel, and they're wonderful tools that will bless you and your family as well. I would encourage each family to take time to read through them at least 3 times a week. Parents, we're wise to not only have our children read through them, but we're wise to teach them the meaning of each and every one of the commandments. And also, I want to challenge and encourage every single parent to help your children to pray through the Ten Commandments every single day. We're going to take time now to pray through them, and that way you can both pray with me and learn how to pray the Ten Commandments with your children. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Help us this day to put you first. Help us, Lord, to make no graven images. Help us, Lord, to not take your name in vain. Help us, Lord, to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Help us, Lord, to honor our fathers and our mothers. Help us, Lord, to not murder. Help us, Lord, to not commit adultery. Help us, Lord, to not steal. Help us, Lord, to tell the truth. Help us, Lord, to not covet. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Again, I want to encourage every single family listening, make it your goal to pray the 10 Commandments every single day. And again, it's a great and wonderful tool, discipleship tool for you and your family.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Thank you for being here today and tuning into the program here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. We're glad to be with you, and it's my pleasure to welcome Jason Piccolo. He's a former U.S. Border Patrol agent, ICE supervisory officer, and former infantry officer in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, Jason, and thanks for joining in today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Stacey.
It's fantastic to have you because in the last segment, we actually were discussing a very difficult story for us to listen to and to discuss. And it's the story of this illegal alien who he's been caught, but he raped a 2-year-old. He cut her mother in the mouth, sliced her face open, stabbed another woman, beat up a few people, all before he was apprehended. And he was deported 4 times before this, all of this activity. So he's in the country illegally for the 5th time doing all of this.
Well, the problem is this is a common story. There was an article over the weekend about an alien that was deported. He came back. He was arrested by the police, but they released him. He subsequently drove down the wrong way and killed 2 federal agents. I mean, this is a common occurrence, and it's been going on for decades. And we're finally starting to realize it. We have to take action on this.
So what should we be doing? Because the latest news out of the White House is that the children have been reunited with their families. The ankle bracelets are back. These people are being released into the country. And the number of people who are claiming asylum and entering the country illegally, that number is up over 800% from this time last year.
It is because the optics down in South America and Central America are, if you come to the United States, you will get some sort of benefit. Now, you have way too many immigration laws on the books right now that haven't been addressed. I mean, the Immigration and Nationality Act, DACA, everything. We really need to address the laws and then show that, hey, you know what, if we're going to have a zero tolerance, that there's zero tolerance. If you come here, that, you're going to have to come here the right way if you want to stay. Because right now it's in such limbo that you don't know whether or not you can come over here and your DACA is going to get approved or some other benefit's going to get approved. So they're flooding the border right now.
So the same article at the Washington Examiner that talks about the increase in asylum claims also points out that violence in South America has gone down by 40%. So while it's still very dangerous and an unacceptable level of violence, especially for Americans who are used to relative peace and safety, it's a much better situation than it was 2 years ago in 2016 when they last measured the numbers. How do we get people where they need to be, where they're applying for asylum in the numerous missions that we have around the southern, so South American countries have an untold number of U.S. embassies and missions at which they can claim asylum, but these people are bypassing those so that they can cross into the country illegally.
Well, that's the other issue, too. I believe Mexico has 9 consulate offices open up right now, and the thing is we need to coordinate with the Mexican government to allocate spaces. So let's say right now we have 10 cities, we have ankle bracelets, we have other means that we can release people and detain people. But what we should do is work with the Mexican government to have an asylum point of contact down there. And the other issue, does that make sense? Yeah. I.e., we could send more asylum, send people down there on temporary duty, asylum officers, etc., process the asylum claim so there's not such a backlog. So there can't be complaints that, hey, you know what, it's taken me 2 years to get an asylum claim, or I've been waiting for 2 weeks just to get an application.
So I understand we need to, streamline the process and speed it up. But the fact is, over 95% of individuals who apply for asylum have their claims denied because they don't meet the criteria for claiming asylum and entering the country. And we don't have the capacity as a country, landmass, economically. We in no way could accept every person who wants to seek and claim asylum in the United States to escape horrible living conditions or economic, lower standards, et cetera. How do we get past this place where everyone seems to be stuck on the idea that people just need another way to get in here, when the reality is the majority of them don't meet the standard to come here under asylum-seeking status.
Well, that's a reality, too, and that's the message that needs to be presented not just by our government, but by the other governments that, you know what, if you have a legitimate asylum claim, you have to pass these certain criteria, and if you don't come to a consulate officer or don't come to the United States, because the thing is, people just don't realize what an asylum claim actually is. It's someone fearing for their life. I mean, this isn't just, you can go to Chicago nowadays and have a lot more violence in, I'd say 50% of South and Central America. So they have to understand that you have to have a legitimate reason to come to the United States.
So a legitimate reason is one in which your government is persecuting you or there's some form of violence that's being leveled against you because of who you are, correct?
Yes.
So many of these people don't meet that standard. I mean, that's just not the case.
No, it's not. And you know what? The thing is, we don't have people legitimately applying for asylum at a designated port of entry. What you're having now is you're having people enter the border through the porous areas where there's no fence line, where there's no walls, and they're not presenting themselves to a designated immigration official. Their first contact with a designated immigration official is when that Border Patrol agent arrests them out in the middle of the desert or up in the mountains. So they're not even presenting themselves to either a consulate office or to a designated port of entry. And that's like, let me explain a port of entry. That's for the audience that doesn't realize that would be like coming in through the border of Tijuana to San Diego, going up to where all the customs people are and saying, hey, here I am, I want to apply for asylum, I want to apply for refugee status. It's not coming in through the areas where, there's nobody around and you're just trying to circumnavigate it and hope you don't get caught.
And then additionally, the areas where people are entering illegally are also well-known and well-traveled drug trafficking areas. So it's actually more dangerous to cross illegally than it is to simply go to a port of entry and claim asylum there.
It is. And that's what the problem with this whole issue is that a lot of the family units coming across right now, there are a good percentage of them, I don't know the facts specific, but there are a good percentage of them that are not family related. They're pairing adults with children, and they're getting smuggled up here. They're getting trafficked. It's $1 billion a year industry, or $1 billion or more to traffic people up here. So it's a really, really big chance that you're going to get either one trafficked for sex or for another labor means, or you could actually get killed or harmed, lose your life or limb.
And are we not also talking about something very, very, it's horrible to consider, but it's the truth, which is that when you talk about these children being paired with adults, many of these children have been trafficked into the country on multiple occasions. They're being used as a means of entry and then shipped back so that they can be used again.
That is the absolute horror about this whole situation is the children. And the children, the women, even men are getting victimized and they're being exploited sexually, and even just sent to labor camps. They're just getting abused over and over. The adults, some adults are using them to come across the border. Then, like you said, they send a kid back down to South America, Central America, and then they send that kid back over just to get the adult forward. And the victim is that young child. The news has been focused a lot in the past on, the MS-13s and the gang members coming across, but there are thousands of tender-age children being used and abused by these smuggling organizations.
So that kind of points to the truth of what the Trump administration has been sharing, which one of the things that they said was, I saw one of the news reports, mainstream media, showing that some of the children who've been separated from their parents didn't recognize their moms. That is either a function of them having been away from their parents for a while, or it's a function of the fact that these children aren't really here with their moms, that those are not their actual parents.
Exactly. And that's the reason why, initially when this first started happening in 2013, when the surge with the unaccompanied alien children, was I'll explain the process. It'll take me about 2 minutes, just for the audience to kind of have an idea of how the border works. The child would either come by themselves or with an adult. They'd get arrested at the border by Customs and Border Protection or by an officer. a Customs and Border Protection officer or a Border Patrol agent. They would then get over to ICE custody. We would then release them to Health and Human Services, to Office of Refugee Resettlement, and then they would be sent to a contracted facility, then released. And at the time, there was no vetting going on, not even to fingerprint the sponsors or to even conduct the basic criminal index checks. But now what we're doing is, in 2016, they passed it where you have to fingerprint the sponsors in order to release them. And now they're actually implementing that. And then most recently, now we're doing DNA. DNA is the absolute, that's what we're going to have to use if we're going to want to really believe that child is with the right adult.
So the essence of what we're talking about here is more money, more technical expertise, and more opportunities for us to utilize every means that we can to protect children while still protecting the border. And we have Congress and, basically the entire media working against the president who's attempting to do this.
Well, the other issue, too, is we have the underlying fact that the cartel organizations, the smuggling organizations, will smuggle anything. And right now, those children, those adults, and everybody else are a commodity. We have to disrupt and dismantle these smuggling organizations and attack them where it hurts, at the money source. Because right now, this problem is not going to go away. They're just going to find another means to traffic these children and these people. Right now, they're using adults. Right now, they're coming in as a family unit. But the thing is, this problem is not going away until we have full support by the country, a bipartisan full support. And you can't keep attacking the president, and because you're not going to get anything done.
So where do the entrenched establishment Republicans come in on this? You have Paul Ryan and others who are really looking for some kind of amnesty deal, which just encourages more illegal immigration. And you have that's diametrically opposed to what voters and the American people want. Even Democrats, when polled, don't want to abolish ICE or open the borders or have a free-for-all down there. We don't have representatives who are acting the way that they've been elected to behave when they're sent to Washington, D.C. to act on behalf of the American people.
Well, right now the optics is spinning to abolish ICE, which I really take offense to that. It's because they're trying to run on that immigration platform. Hey, if we get rid of ICE, we're going to get rid of immigration, and we're going to have open borders. That's what the one side is looking at right now. But we need our politicians to say, hey, look, we are going to sit down and we're going to pass some sort of immigration reform, because that's what we need to stop this problem.
I agree. So I guess as someone who, with your background, you're an expert in this area, what do you recommend to those of us who we are concerned about what's happening to children at the border? But I definitely feel, and I think the surveys and the polls also show that most Americans blame their parents or so-called trafficking smugglers. They blame them for the situation that's going on with the border, with children being separated. And what we want to see is a sealed-up southern border, not mechanisms by which the children and these people who are bringing them in get shipped into the country.
Well, Stacey, you mentioned before, I am a former infantry captain. And, in the military, you have what they call choke points. And it's not a popular opinion on some sides of the circle right now, but we really do need a wall and not a fence. A fence is just not relevant to the situation. You need what they call choke points, areas that we can funnel these children in and these families, these smuggling corridors, all into one central location where we can arrest and apprehend the trafficking cells. We can stop the trafficking cells. Because without a wall, you're not going to have those places that we call choke points. And the reality is you're not going to be able to put up a 1,500-mile wall. So you're going to have areas that are going to be open. But if you focus your efforts in those areas, you can curb the incoming traffic.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and I really appreciate your time today. Jason Piccolo, U.S. Border Patrol agent before, now you're retired, former ICE supervisory officer, former infantry officer. Quite a background there, and we really appreciate your expertise and you coming on the show today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Stacey.
All right, we'll speak to you again soon. And we actually are going to we have just a couple minutes left in this segment, and I have to say, I appreciate so his analysis was impartial. It's not about politics. It's really about if you care about these people. And there is more than one way to care about people who are being basically abused. The children are being abused, and the parents are using them for economic improvement. In other words, if they didn't have children, they know they wouldn't be able to get into the country. And we see people coming over pregnant. I mean, people coming over with children that are not their own. The idea here is, as Christians, we want to obey the law. We want to have our laws followed. We want to bring justice to those who are trafficking human beings and doing these evil activities. That does not include an attitude that says, well, we're just going to set up a refugee organization. We're going to help as many refugees get into the country as possible. That people are passing that off as the solution, and it's not. It doesn't help because it encourages more people to attempt to get into the country as refugees, as asylum claimants, et cetera, et cetera. It's a multi-pronged approach that has to be taken. He talked about genetics and testing and all of that. Yes, we need that too. But we need a deterrent. The wall, if let's just play devil's advocate, let's say we can't do 1,500 miles of solid wall, but we can put up much more wall than there is now, not fencing, but wall. And then the areas, as he said, choke points, would then create an area or a mechanism by which we could say, this is an asylum point, or this is a border control point. So you're not actually on American soil at this point. You're being held here until we can ascertain whether or not you actually can enter the country as an asylum claimant. Anyone else who's not claiming asylum is turned around immediately without court cases or anything like that. These kind of creative solutions can happen, and they will when we decide that's what we want to do. We'll be back with more right after this.
Budgets. And last year was the biggest increase in defense spending across Europe and Canada in a generation.
Why was that last year?
It's also because of your leadership, because your clear message. And
they won't write that. But
no, I have said it before. But the thing is that it really has. Your message is having an impact.
Wow. So the head of NATO admits to President Trump that his words and displeasure, voicing of his true feelings on the matter about the contributions to NATO, have had an impact and have resulted in nations ponying up and paying more money in. So much so that they've been able to increase their budget. Now, you know, cost cutting, conservatism, smaller this, smaller that. Part of me is screaming, America should contribute less. Let other countries step up to the plate. You know, but the point is there wouldn't even be a discussion about increasing the budget or having more money to use if it weren't for Donald Trump. And he admitted that. And Donald Trump said in a very low voice, well, they won't report that. And they're not going to. We'll report it here. You can get the truth here always. But it's interesting to see the way he's able to move the needle on so many things by simply telling the truth. I'm really happy that he's doing it. I really am. I think a resetting of our relationship with foreign leaders so that they don't see us as just a big, huge piggy bank that they can stuff their little hands into and yank out whatever they want is appropriate and it is needed. And it couldn't come at a better time. It should have been done 20 years ago. It should have been done again 10 years ago. And then it would be done now, but we would have much less work to do. But, you know, you take what you can get. And this is part of the reason why the opposition to Donald Trump is so strong. And that's why, you know, I'm willing to not pay as much attention to the tweets that people don't like and the things that are triggering people and upsetting. No one's perfect. We're never going to have a president where you're just like all day, every day, he's never done anything wrong. He never will do anything wrong, unless you're talking about the president of the United States being our Father in heaven. Since we know that's not going to happen, we're going to go ahead and go with whatever human being best fits the bill. And if we're comparing where we are now to where we would be if there was a Hillary Clinton presidency, it's a whole universe apart. She would be preparing to install another justice on the Supreme Court who would completely obliterate the Heller decision and would reverse our gun rights. The border would be wide open, even more than it is now. And she would still be funneling money from world leaders into the Clinton Foundation, enriching herself. As it is now, she's trying to mount a reboot of her last presidential campaign by running around and campaigning with Elizabeth Warren, who Democrats now feel possibly won't be their, you know, savior in a headdress. She won't be able to fix it for them. Cory Booker can't fix it. The bench is not as deep as they thought. They're now actually talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden. And then, of course, I'm sure they would love it if The Rock, who has come out publicly and said that he is considering running for president in 2020. If The Rock would run as a Democrat, that would save everything for them. Because everybody likes The Rock. But I'm not voting based on who I like. And I don't think tens of millions of Americans, we're not concerned with liking the president. We're concerned with electing someone who will do the dirty work of running this country. It's hard work. And we need someone who is firm and strong and not afraid to be unpopular. So here's the other thing. You got to go to my Facebook page and look there. I have a picture from last night that someone else shared. It's a candid shot taken by one of the photographers of Donald Trump. And they're all kind of standing in a line. And I guess maybe the camera guy, said, turn for a picture. And they turn and you've got Donald Trump kind of smiling or smirking a little bit and looking kind of mischievous. And then you have Emmanuel Macron behind him and he's gripping President Trump's arm and he's smiling like they're best friends. Now, remember, Macron was supposed to be this enemy of Donald Trump. Now, I think they argue a bunch and I think they disagree on a lot. And I think, they make dueling statements about who said what and who agreed to what. I think they disagree, not just a lot, but I think they really are far apart on some things. but it doesn't mean they don't have a good rapport. And I think people underestimate the likability of Donald Trump as a world leader dealing with other world leaders. And even in his tough moments where Americans are all afraid that he's saying things that will make people not like him, being a leader isn't about being liked. Being a leader is about doing what you know is right when you know everyone's going to hate you for it and doing it anyway. That's leadership. I think he knows that. He's not perfect, but he's doing a better job than a Hillary Clinton would. Let's go to the phones. Hey, Charles from Texas. Thanks for calling in today. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What's your comment?
Yeah, I want to talk about these illegals. We need to end the DACA. We need to shut the border down and just get rid of all of them. In that 14th Amendment, that was just for slaves anyway.
Okay. Thanks for calling the show. So
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So when I'm talking about Donald Trump and leadership, I think it's appropriate for us to go to other people who are leaders, and not just the ones we like, but ones that we maybe don't like, and look at the way that they deal with these types of situations. And I think as Americans, because we have kind of a TV society now where a lot of what we see is filtered through the lens of what television programs kind of teach us is this is the way things work. And in some of these movies, you'll see, most of them, you'll see that leaders they're strong, silent types. And, either they have them in movies where they use profanity all the time, or they have them where they don't use any profanity at all. When the truth is, human beings are fallible, and you can shoot to never, ever curse. And many people achieve that. They hit that mark. And there are others who curse occasionally, et cetera. The reality of human beings is that it's unexpected. You don't have a guarantee that one person will always be one way and another person will be another way. And I think when you get to a ton of content where you're watching and you're seeing what leaders are like, some of it's sanitized. So the way that leaders really were with people, in order to kind of get a true picture of that, you have to read historical books about them. And then you find out, oh, wow, this president was a potty mouth, or, oh, wow, this business leader was kind of like an iron fist. He was only friendly with family. Everybody else he viewed as a potential business person, and he always presented the same type of affront to them. These are things that I think fall to the wayside in our consideration when we're talking about what leadership looks like. And so that's why with President Trump, first of all, there's more than one facet to him. And I'll contrast that by a statement that was put out yesterday. So you've got Emmanuel Macron's wife, and she did an interview with a French magazine, a news magazine, and they were asking her about her relationship with Melania Trump. And in the interview, she talks about the first thing, her kind of observations, her first observations and reactions to the way that Melania Trump lives at the White House in the United States. And she said, one of the things that really surprised me is that Melania Trump has a very, very strong personality. She's easy to laugh. She laughs a lot, and she's very personable, like she's entertaining. But she tries to hide the strength of her personality. So I was, reading, I'm thinking, wow, that's interesting. And then she said she was shocked and dismayed by the lifestyle that Melania Trump leads as the First Lady, because it's very controlled and she has almost no freedom. She can't open windows in the White House. She can't just take off down the sidewalk in front of the White House and walk to a coffee shop or go, shopping. She can't do those things as First Lady of the United States, where the First Lady of France can. She says every morning she gets up, gets dressed, and walks right out of her residence and just strolls on down the sidewalk, and she is not molested. No one bothers her. She just takes off, goes shopping, goes coffee, does whatever she wants, has lunch with friends, goes to work, does whatever she wants to do. And she found that to be a very, she was flabbergasted by the difference in her life as the First Lady of France and Melania Trump's as the First Lady of the United States. And there were other things. She was very complimentary towards the First Lady. But I just thought that was a fascinating contrast that she illuminated between her life and the life of Melania Trump. And so just like we don't often get to hear Melania Trump speak, we never see her in kind of private situations because how would they be private if the news media was there giving us pictures? We do see her interacting with people. Like the reason that I got to that article, which it was just some translated excerpts of the article. The way that I got there was that I saw some photographs of the president in Belgium, and they were at a NATO couples like dinner thing. The wives were in the space as well as the husbands, but the wives were seated in chairs together as a group. And as the women filed in, the cameras are rolling, and you see a bunch of the world leaders' wives come in, and Melania Trump comes in, and she's very self-contained. You can tell it's like she's giving off kind of a little bit of a stressed out vibe. She sits down and just begins to kind of really slowly observe the space. And then Emmanuel Macron's wife comes in, and Melania Trump immediately lights up and starts smiling, and they greet each other, and then they turn and start, laughing and talking to each other, just the two of them, even though there are other women seated on the same row with them. And then from there, they had the link that you could click over to with the excerpts from the article that was about Mrs. Macron and her describing the differences. And she said that they got along famously while she was in the United States, and she felt they created a real friendship between the two of them. And that was evident in their reactions to each other when she entered the space after Melania Trump at this NATO meeting in Brussels. And so I think all of these things point to us. We can know a lot about the president of the United States. We can know a lot about the leadership style of individuals by watching them in public and judging by their actions. But we don't really understand the dynamic between foreign world leaders and our president, and the representations that are given to us in the media are often very inaccurate and very skewed and peppered with the kinds of, it's an intentional direction to make Americans think one way about President Trump, when the reality is, before he ran for the presidency, he was one of the most popular Americans in the country. He was a well-known public figure and liked by all, including leaders in the black community and lots of black Democrats. So the idea that he doesn't have a rapport with any of these world leaders, I do think he has a strained relationship with the head of Germany, Angela Merkel. I do think he has a strained relationship with her, but I think it's strained because the two of them can't have a rapport because ideologically they are so different, where Emmanuel Macron seems to be almost like he's so youthful. He has a different presentation, which can facilitate we've all been there, someone that you think, how could you possibly think that stuff? But personality wise, the person is great fun to be around and really interesting and fascinating. And it helps you to kind of set to the side your reservations about whatever the thing is that you're working on. And if you've ever had to work on committees and things like that, you're often paired. The committee is comprised of individuals who would never, ever, as a group, be in the same group. But you're in the same group because you're working on whatever it is, whatever committee or whatever board or what have you. And it's the same type of thing with our world leaders. So I just feel like we all need encouragement to view them as what they are, which is people who have these individual personalities, these individual strengths and weaknesses, which includes President Trump. And he's going to do, in my estimation, he's only doing this job to right what he sees are some endemic wrongs and to protect the American people, which is a really tough job. He needs our prayers. All of these world leaders do, but specifically our president does. And that's what we have to do. That's the show for today. I will be back with you tomorrow with more Stacey on the Right. Have a blessed evening, you guys.